take on the investment issue, and I think this is something that's been called out as a concern of the startup community, that, you know, if you talk about the kind of investment that the US draws in for the deep tech sector, 35 billion and in excess of that, or even the EU, which is, again, you know, double-digit numbers, India's still under 5 billion at this point in time. So, especially at the seed front, what do you believe we need to do to ensure that we draw in the kind of capital that's required to really realize the potential we're talking about?
Well, I think that there are different aspects of the problem. So when you compare the U.S., you certainly have a lot more deep tech investors who are looking at the U.S. market than are looking at India today, because there's still a concern about the geographical risk associated with India. People still don't understand it well, and they're not like us who have had prior experience in India, will come in and get involved early. A lot of people will wait until they see some successes. So I think people like Celesta and others who are starting to pave the way, you'll start seeing a lot more people. In fact, we've already seen it. When we first started investing in deep tech, our first investment, we were the only investors. There was nobody else. And you're now starting to see more. And some of them are Indian investors, Indian VCs that are now starting to invest as well. And you're now starting to see US investors coming in. But in the deep tech space, there are not a lot of people who are really committed to deep tech. They will jump in when it looks good, and as soon as you have a little problem, they jump back out and they go on to easier pastures. So I think it will take some time, but I think the big driver will be success. As you see more and more success happening, more and more dollars will come in. I wouldn't worry too much about where we are today, because we're just getting started. So I would say 5 billion in deep tech today for where we are is probably not a bad thing. The question is, are we going to have much more than that in the future? I think there's another aspect, however, and Sriram touched on it. We can't just look at the curriculum is one thing, but in the deep tech space, you have to be able to leapfrog. And leapfrogging is not going to come from the curriculum that is taught in schools. It's going to come from developing of IP that give you a competitive advantage at the device side or at the manufacturing side. Today we focus on the device side because it's fabulous. And all of the innovation comes from the device, which means research at the university level and investing in research to develop core IP that you can use to leapfrog the competition is going to be a place where you're going to have to get some significant investment, and that's going to have to be led by the government.
You know, on that point, especially as far as R&D spends are concerned, and we've had this discussion every time the finance minister gets ready to present the budget, industry puts this down as a big wish list that, you know, enhance the tax ops associated with R&D investment. And what we've actually seen is the opposite. We've seen the tax ops being cut because the government's point of view is that you're not spending enough private capital on research and development, so why should we provide you more SOPs? How do we get out of this conundrum?
Well, I think you have to take a systems view of the whole thing. So one is these targeted approaches. The other is overall funding for promoting entrepreneurship. So you asked the question about seed funds. Well, seed funds have a big role to play, but they can be successful only if there are follow-on funds. They need to be the early stage funds like us, and then we will be more successful if there are growth funds beyond that. So you have to have this whole ecosystem. And that ecosystem, the government can actually help. In fact, today, Amitabh Kant, at the session before, earlier today, he talked about the need for a substantial fund of funds for deep tech. And he said, if you're looking at deep tech transformation in India, you need to fuel it with a very substantial dollar of funding, which can then backstop venture capital funds, which could be at different levels.
Sure. Well, you know, we'll have to wait to see whether the government moves down that road. They have, of course, got a fund of funds in place, so we'll have to see whether there is a further allocation provided within that or a separate fund altogether. But Sri, let's address the point that you were trying to make in terms of competitive strength and competitive advantage, especially as we anticipate future opportunities. And everyone at this point in time is talking about AI. And to your point about how should India look at the AI opportunity, what should the narrative be? Let me throw that question back to you.
We missed the browser revolution. We missed the whole internet revolution. We were building a lot of applications and services pretty successfully, but we missed the core technology development. Now you're given another opportunity where there's a new technology, and this is our moment for one more bubble. The bubble has come. Because there are some bubble-like tendencies in AI as well. So you have to pick the right areas within AI. And to your question, I think building, the local languages specific language model, the regional languages specific language models doesn't exist. So today, if you wanted to get a ChatGPT-like experience in Telugu or in Kannada or whatever, doesn't exist. And OpenAI is not focusing on it. And there are private companies and some nonprofits that are trying to do that. In fact, there's a nonprofit called Karya, you probably know, which is doing that, right? Is there a commercial opportunity to actually take a leadership position in defining how local language specific LLMs can be developed? Because that presents an opportunity not just for India, it presents an opportunity for everything that is non-English. And that's AI. India has the capability to do it. We can take a leadership position in that we have such a wealth of experience in diverse language, nuances here and dialects that can be easily exported to Africa and Southeast Asia and all of those areas. So that's just one example. So within AI, there are pockets of innovation that India can leapfrog. And I think that's an opportunity for us to think about.
That's the opportunity, and that's the bus that we don't want to miss, and that's the bus that we do want to ride. But Nick, speaking of disruptions and speaking of anticipating future opportunities, I mean, the set-top box has been disrupted by fiber and OTT, so that piece is out of the way at this point in time. What are potentially the next few sectors that you would look at from a disruption perspective, and what kind of disruption do you anticipate there and the role that you would play?
But one of the areas in India here is in what we call bioconvergence, which is the intersection of high tech and deep tech in solving problems associated with med tech. So these are diagnostics or other applications. And the reason I'm excited about in India is when you look at what most other companies are doing outside of India today, they're trying to solve a problem of convenience. How do you make medical technology more convenient for people who already have access to medical technology? And in India, many of the companies we're seeing here are trying to solve the problem of access, which is how do you create access to medical services for people who do not have medical services? Because that's a big problem in India. It turns out that's the biggest problem in the world associated with this. And so that's an area that I am personally very excited about in India.
Arun?
Among others.
Among others. That's your top bet. Arun?
My own feeling is that we are going to be surprised by the new things that we come across. I think it's very difficult to predict what a new technology, especially AI at its current state, is going to throw up in front of us. So I'm really waiting to be surprised.
We're now in an era of high interest rates. It doesn't look like we're going to reverse back to cheap money at least in the foreseeable future. We're going through geopolitical flashpoints, geopolitical tensions, which do weigh on business and commercial decisions as well. So it's a macroeconomic challenge that we're faced with, but also a geo-economic problem that companies and countries are faced with. From a startup founder's perspective, how are you looking at this situation as an investor? How do you look at this situation, and what is it going to mean for future capital and investments?
Well, I think you're exactly right. I think at least for the near future, the phase of easy money, the phase of inflated valuations, all of that is, I think, on a pause, if not significantly reversed. And it's a good thing. Sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right now, people are, you want to see how much your cash can be extended to pay your employees and, get to profitability. It's no longer cool to say you're a unicorn, but you're not profitable. And I think that's, you have to pause and, let that sink in. Because being profitable is virtuous. Being a unicorn is pretty fluffy. So I would rather do the first thing than the latter. So if you focus on that, whether the cost of capital is, continues to be prohibitively high or not, it's bothersome, but it's not life-threatening for a startup because you can continue to become more capital efficient. So that's point number one. Point number two, I think it's people are right now, unfortunately, in a very difficult place, whether it is, looking at what's going on in the Middle East, in Israel, and, there's a fundamental re-questioning of the information that we all consume. So there is a, there's a need for systems and technologies that really remove the wheat from the chaff in terms of what's real information and what's fake. And that blurring is causing a lot of problems. And that affects investors too. Because one of the things that we find is that you go into a startup and they claim that the market is very big. They claim that their technology is very good. They claim that they've made lots of progress, only to find later a lot of it is not true. And you're well aware of what's going on in India with some of the very famous funds that have become victims to that. So in a way, these are fundamental issues that startups have to really address. Focus on being capital efficient. Focus on not spending monies that you don't have. Using equity to acquire customers, a lot of people do it, is not the model that we like. We would rather use equity capital to solve fundamental technology problems. If you solve fundamental technology problems judiciously, business will come and you will be sustainable. And that's a much better approach than doing anything else.
So as a value-add investor, Arun, I'm going to give you the final say before I toss it across for any questions that we may have here from participants. As a value-add investor, what would the advice be to Indian entrepreneurs who are looking at the global opportunity and to companies operating outside of India looking at the India opportunity?
So I would say for Indian entrepreneurs, we certainly are looking for folks who want to solve an important problem, which means it has a large global market, and that they have a defensible approach to doing it. And today, in fact, at one of the earlier sessions, Ankit, IdeaForge, made a point, is I want to build something that's world's best. I'm not just looking to build something for India's best. So I think that's a really important point. I think I would also say that we need teams that can execute. And one thing that's really important for entrepreneurs is to have a very realistic sense of what they can achieve and then execute appropriately. Usually the problems start when execution fails and they don't understand why execution doesn't occur. So the answer to the question is people who can execute, who are looking to solve important problems with defensible approaches.
Thank you very much, Nick, Sri, and Arun for joining us here to talk about the road ahead as far as the collaboration between India and the Valley is concerned on deep tech transformation.